Believe it or not, this boomer is trying to figure out how to do this whole live thing. I've been asked to do this so that we can start talking about some cases and some issues with the legal community, etc. As you guys may or may not know me, my name is Roger Ponce. I'm a criminal defense attorney, originally out of LA, but now we reside in beautiful Bakersfield. It is beautiful, but it is hot as heck up here. I don't know how people survive, but man, it is warm. Anyways, I wanted to come on live just to kind of discuss a couple of legal issues that I've been dealing with in my current trial. It's been quite interesting, honestly. It's a murder case. It's pretty, unfortunately gruesome in many ways, but I think it's one that I've learned so much from, and I've kind of have touched on it a little bit. I talked a little bit about there's the spousal marital privilege, and I think those are all wonderful things, right, that I think people need to know about, because what I've come to realize in this trial anyways is that so much is misunderstood about hearsay, so much is misunderstood about co-conspirators and those kinds of statements. And I think that, there's a reality that happens in the court, and then there's a reality that happens out in the streets when police officers are making arrests, etc. But I think it's important to understand that, just because information is out there, or just because a person has been arrested, and you're getting a lot of this information through the public square, etc., does not mean that it's going to hold water once it actually comes to court, right? And for those of us that are a little bit older, I think I was in high school, early high school, when the O.J. Simpson trial first got started, and it obviously paralyzed all of LA. And the result ultimately, I think, really spooked a lot of people, because from the public square, depending, obviously, there was a lot. It was a lot more complicated, obviously, because we were going through the whole Rodney King, beating and the disturbances in LA, and so there was a lot of black and white feeling about, law enforcement, etc. But I think that from a legal standpoint, in terms of what happened in court, is crazy, because obviously we all kind of feel and know that OJ was guilty, and so the question becomes, how did the jury find him not guilty? And I think that's that patch, right? That bridge that exists between what the law says and what evidence is, and what ultimately the jury ultimately hears, right? And that's what the jury has to sort of, that's the information the jury has to work with, versus what the public thinks they know about a case. And so, that's where really understanding and working with a lawyer who understands the evidence code really comes into play, because I saw an advertisement that said, just because you did it doesn't mean you're guilty. I thought it was funny, but there is some truth to that. And what I mean by that is, the principal actors who determine, what is going to be sort of enforced is police, right? And the police ultimately are dispatched in our communities based on resources and based on priorities, etc. And so, if you're from Bakersfield, it doesn't take very long to know that there's a huge difference between the east side and the west side, right? And certain crimes that are particularly aggressively prosecuted on the east side, may not be a reality on the west side. And it's not because they don't exist. It's just because, law enforcement, like anything else, and resources are limited, but they're the first line of defense. And they're the first, if you will, agency that determines what ultimately is going to be cited, what's going to be considered a misdemeanor, what's going to be arrested as a felony. And so their actions have a huge impact, right? But the streets is one thing, and what they can prove is a whole nother, right? And then the next layer, obviously, is the district attorney's office. And the district attorney's office is the one that really determines what they're going to charge a person with. And so, it's interesting to keep that in mind, because, obviously a person, and I talk to jurors all the time, and I try to explain this very nuanced point, and that is, just because the DA's office has charged you with, let's say, for example, attempted murder, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that the facts or the information really support that kind of a conviction. Maybe it's an assault, right? It could even be an assault with a deadly weapon, etc. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's an attempted murder. And so that's why you have to be very careful when you hear things out in the news and you hear information and information that's really, unqualified or hasn't really been tested, or information that would otherwise be not admissible in court. Because what happens in court is really what determines whether I think a jury ultimately convicts or doesn't convict an individual, right? Now, I have my own 2 cents about what juries ultimately do and whether they they can behave and misbehave accordingly. But I think that, for the most part, jurors try, and And that's why the important game that the attorney plays, or important role, I shouldn't call it a game, but the important role that an attorney plays is what evidence they can keep out, or what, making sure that the evidence that the prosecution has supposedly collected from law enforcement is legitimately good information and good evidence. And so, this trial has really made me realize how this has been one of the most complicated trials I've tried, and it's only because it is so many multi-layer. And once it's over, I'm gonna get on here again and talk a little bit about it, because I think it's something that the community can really learn from, on many grounds. And this is a classic example, in my humble opinion, of a person who, kind of stuck his neck out for friends, and then gets himself caught up in a situation that unfortunately may change the trajectory of his life, and certainly the life of his family. But I'm hopeful that the jury sees it, obviously, our way, because I don't think that, I think that the DA's office may have bitten more than they can chew off. But, again, the jury is ultimately the one that determines that. But I wanted to get on here to kind of talk about that, and see, whether people are interested in having me give these quick conversations, maybe once a week and whatnot. As you guys may not know this, but I'm a professor, so I teach law. And so one of the things that I take pride in is sort of bringing the law to the streets, if you will, and explaining legal concepts in ways that make sense to people. So if this is helpful, send me a comment and let me know whether you think that this is something you may want to hear more from. Okay. All right, guys, have a wonderful night.